All right, so we're picking up where we left off, talking about global and more specific research questions. So we've spoken generally about the process of science, some of the things that we expect, scientific process in general, and the contributions of theory to hypotheses. So we're going to step back just a little bit and talk about research questions and how to get there. A lot of this should be review for all of you. All right, so let's start off talking about general global questions. A global question is a large question that is difficult to answer. It's usually the start of the process, not the research question itself. It is typically big and vague. How do democracies die? What makes elections winnable? What makes people turn out to vote? What causes regime decline? It could be really general, very big, often too difficult to get one specific answer. Research questions, on the other hand, are much narrower in focus. Research questions are empirically testable, which means they are referring to a specific phenomena, specific period, specific place, and specific condition. So how do you move from a big, fuzzy question, global question, to a research question? First, it is essential that you unpack all the big issues that you're involved and interested in so that you can pull out the things that you are better able to tackle. So start by listing all the issues that one sees being involved with the question at hand. How do democracies die, for instance? Choose an item from that list and identify questions that come to mind regarding that item. So if you're wondering what makes democracies die, and you ask yourself, well, what is the role of an external shock? Or what is the role of a economic crisis? You now start having a list. Economic shock, external crisis. Those are items on that list. And then you can move from there. An example here is, let's say you're researching AIDS. You want to know who gets it, what is it, where is it, what are governments doing about it, how many people have it, how do you prevent it? You can ask this for just about any public health question. Or virtually any issue whatsoever. You will always be able to ask, what are governments doing about it? For those of you with questions that seem to not fully line up or be clearly political in nature, that's one way in which you bring it back to the political science realm. The next step, and you guys are going to get tired of hearing me say this, is to consult the experts. So how do you consult the experts? There are places to look, including JSTOR. Luckily, we have a subscription to JSTOR. It allows you to review all the big articles in political science, do a search in political science, or a regional, let's say African studies, Latin American studies, or international relations. The small caveat here is that JSTOR does not carry the most recent articles in the electronic storage system. So the more recent things you may have to look elsewhere. You can check EBSCO. There are obviously book-length manuscripts. The Reinert Alumni Library still might have some of the more recent journals that have been published in political science. Another place to look, and it's not on here on this slide, but that is to look at the professional organizations where conferences take place. So the American Political Science Association is a good place to look, so is the Midwest Political Science Association. Check out their more recent conferences, scroll through the program, see if you can identify a study that has been done, something recent. Obviously these works have not been published yet, but it's a good place to start. If you're looking for where the literature has evolved, what are the new questions being asked, that's a really good place to look as well. Reviewing the literature has two main benefits. Obviously, you can see what's already been done, and it helps you generate new questions or ways to look at the same problem. Your research questions must be formulated so that they seek a cause for a particular political phenomenon. Luckily for you, virtually every question, every concern that could be out there, we can find a political phenomena attached to it. It's helpful to look across states, whether they're states in the US or states across the world. We are looking for the larger N size that we possibly can. So that's one way in which you can do that. It's really important to clearly define your key terms. Maybe it's your dependent variable. What exactly are you interested in? So once you've identified a research question, really narrowing the key term, the real phenomena that you're interested in, is really important. And ask yourself why this is important for the field of political science. In blue and in red, you're going to see the formulation that we have used in PLS 215. What explains the variance in the dependent variable? Why? Or what explains the variance in this case, AIDS policies across the world? All right, that's one formulation. It's a very simple one. It makes things very simple, very straightforward. If you want to go with something a little bit more complicated, you can, but I will warn you that it usually tends to create more headaches rather than clarifying your interest. The lit reviews, and here's where they are really valuable. They're going to help narrow your focus and place the research in its proper context. For our purposes, I want you to focus on the 3 key aspects of each article or book that you read. I want you to focus on theory. Now, what do I mean by focus on theory? Well, there are a couple things that you want to keep in mind. What is the theoretical contribution? What body of literature does this come from? What is the question, the research question that is being asked and answered in this particular contribution in general? For methods, there are a number of other questions that you can ask. You can start by identifying the hypotheses, identifying the dependent variable and the independent variables that have been used in each article or book that you read. Ask yourself, what is the level of analysis? What is the unit of analysis? How do the authors go about analyzing their data? What are their data sources, and how do they use them? The least interesting of all these elements is the findings, which is usually what most people focus on. What did they find, right? What was the end result of their analysis? Now, keeping in mind theory, methods, and findings, it seems like it's a lot, but I will be providing each of you a small template, which I give to all my students, that helps you ask these questions of each article or book that you're reading and place that literature in its proper context. And then you can kind of zoom out from there and ask yourself what the literature has been saying and how to organize the literature in a way that makes sense. Because your lit review should not read like a list of literature. It should not be, author A says this, author B says the following, author C says this other thing. No, it should be organized thematically. Maybe there are a group of authors that argue for a specific method or a specific measurement of a variable or a specific unit of analysis or mode of analysis. And you can find that there are often going to be real debates or dialogues or conflict inside that literature. And that's what should be organizing the way in which you put the literature together. Again, you'll be getting a handout from me to help you read through that literature. Good lit reviews help you formulate good hypotheses. They help you operationalize your key variables, both independent and dependent. Usually they'll give you breadcrumbs as to where to find the data sets and what variables are commonly used. It also helps you consider intervening variables and control variables, those things that you are not necessarily testing in your hypotheses but are still important to explaining the phenomena. And they help you think clearly about case selection. What are you looking at? What specific data points are you going to focus on? Because obviously you can't get the whole universe of data. If you recall in 310, everything that we're doing is effectively a sample of a larger population. So what sample are you selecting and why? And that's where the literature is helpful. It'll also help with research design issues and allow you to narrow in on certain time periods as well. All right, with that in mind, we are going to be moving ahead. Again, all of this should be a review, and we will be spending some time thinking about these things a bit more.